Welcome to the RC Motorsport Europe podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the final pre-AGM episode of the Inside EFRA Podcast.
Yes.
And this time we're talking about the general meeting and the agenda around the general meeting, which means it affects every single class. Mm-hmm. And who better to join us than Frank and me?
Oh,
and of course, the General Secretary, Mr. Mark Rumble. Mark, how are you doing today?
Good morning, chaps. How are we doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well
All
indeed. Looking forward to being in Alicante and getting knee-deep into this agenda.
I'm looking forward to getting to Alicante to really enjoy the sun and not sit inside a room for 12 hours a day, 3 days in a row. Yeah.
Before we get into this is possibly a record-breaking AGM, isn't it, in terms of the number of people attending? It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's been rather unprecedented, in fact, which has given me some logistic challenges, which were sort of slightly undesirable. But that's a problem of sort of desirability and success, I guess, of choosing the venue. So interestingly enough, this venue has been used before a number of years ago, but the room count has just been so much more than ever experienced. Where we, of course, every year put out an AGM sort of tender, I guess, or AGM requirements, or sort of an application to host the AGM. And normally our room count is at sort of 60 is the cap that we'd ever sort of communicate to the host about, and we're at 83 rooms or something, which has given some challenges. So. And thinking about that, I guess it's going to be, if there's 83 rooms and it's at least one person in the room, but sometimes more, we're going to have over 100 people at the AGM, which will be, pretty impressive.
What does that say? I guess it says that a lot of people really care enough to travel to the AGM to have their say and to get involved and to represent their sections and federations. Yeah.
I mean, they're willing to sort of spend their money. The federations are willing to spend their money to come to this event because it's for the good of RC, it's for moving things forward, it's for discussing and sort of paving the future for RC racing in Europe. It's great. It's really good to see that. It's really good to see all the federations getting behind it, even more than they already do. Of course, every year you kind of want it to be like an incremental increase. But this is not incremental. This is
a big step
beyond incremental. This is, and I think, I guess, sort of a couple of factors. I mean, of course, it's Alicante is a nice location, sure, but generally, I don't actually think people go to an AGM to kind of enjoy the surrounding area because it's unlikely you're going to experience it at all.
Yeah, if they are, they'll be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. They will be. Yeah, if they've come for a holiday, they're going to be very, very disappointed. But it's really good to see that increase.
Definitely. So as we get into the actual meeting, it's obviously driven by this document, which has been available on the EFRA.ws website for a couple of months. I mean, well, there's a usual timeline that everything runs to, and it's made public on a certain date every single year so that everyone has plenty of time to digest it. But it's fantastic that in the last year or so, people like yourself on the board give up some time to basically make this available in another media format that's easy to digest and that anyone can just listen to and watch.
Yeah.
It's a great step forward.
Yeah, and from my my perspective, of course, first kind of full year in this position, learning the ropes, and Willie's been assisting me really well, and but it has been sort of busy. It's been really, really busy. Trying to do this when it's your first time doing anything. I guess you're never particularly that sort of straightforward with the process of things. But because of the way EFRA works, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily see, there's a lot of procedure. There's quite a lot of process and a lot of kind of internalized structures, which from my perspective is great news because I kind of know the dates where things need to happen. It's not just made up. There's a timeline when these things need to be published, what needs to be published, and where they need to be published. That's really quite structured. So from my perspective, that kind of gave me a bit of a framework to work with. So then, of course, trying to do things in the way I would want to do things, and I would want others to do things. I've kind of really sort of been regimented with those timelines and the sort of general correspondences and reminders and all those things. And I hope that has kind of been a factor as to why people have been sort of really incredibly informed throughout the whole process of AGM venue, dates, what we're doing, when's it happening, what's going on. Sort of all of those things has really gone out to the federations a lot. It obviously doesn't always then, of course, go straight onto social media, because we do a lot of direct to federation correspondence. But I think, of course, this strategy of also really trying to push the sort of social media side of things, even though that social media doesn't directly go in between the communication path between EFRA to federations, it means that sometimes it kind of reaches different people and sometimes reaches the right people, where if it doesn't otherwise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we look through the document, there's the usual. It usually starts with the Treasurer's report, constitution, and then I think fairly early on, and of course you know this intimately, Mark, so do stop us if we miss anything that you think might be interesting on our whistle-stop tour through the agenda.
Yeah.
But I think one of the first standout ones, or the ones that caught, I think, your eye, was the federation wanting to not use tracks as often as we do. So basically, if a track has hosted an event, an EC, in the last 4 years, they get put into a second tier.
Yeah. Which, of course, it's tricky, really, because I mean, of course, the decisions they happen in the way that they do. It's a total start to finish democratic process, which I think is really important, that the integrity of that process is maintained. And I think also we have to kind of be careful of not kind of putting any further obstacles to host a European Championship in front of people. If anything, I think we need to try to reduce that obstacle count rather than potentially increasing it. Like this proposal is an obstacle that has to be navigated. Nonetheless, it may be a good obstacle. That's for the decision of the federations to decide whether they think it's a good obstacle or a bad one.
Yeah.
But in a time where we want to have more venues applying for ECs, I think not creating obstacles for them to do that is maybe a better strategy.
I thought that this was. I mean, this is actually the second one that stood out. There's only the second proposal on the thing. In this agenda, I thought it was interesting because we always see people saying, why are we, in comments, racers who aren't privy of, going personally to the AGM, and maybe they don't know the various steps of communicating with their federation, and then their federation has to vote on the particular EC venue. They might ask, why are we going to, say, Hungaroring or Fairing or Radovan or all these tracks that are, why are these continually popping up every couple of years? And so maybe I think this is obviously kind of a response to that. And yeah, it's just one of these things that it's not a hot topic necessarily, but it's a talking point that kind of comes up every year, sort of.
I think it's symptomatic of a problem, and this is an attempt to address one problem, which is we're going to the same tracks too often.
Yeah.
But it doesn't solve the reason for that problem, which is not enough tracks are applying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this won't make more tracks apply. It will just mean that less tracks will apply ultimately.
Yeah. Or we can literally choose less tracks.
Yeah.
It's of course something that, we've discussed about in depth between us and of course across the board and across all of the sections, is that this doesn't, this, like I say, it kind of puts an obstacle in as opposed to kind of fixing the root issue of tracks not applying. And that's, we obviously have some sort of like strategies in place that we're going to try to kind of implement next year in the run up to the following AGM, to make sure that there are more tracks applying for events, and that sometimes there can be potentially a communicational disconnect between some of the federations and then some of the tracks in their country, and I think it's just about EFRA doing as much as they possibly can to kind of be really clear on the process of applying, really clear on the finances, because I think if you, and I've said this before, is that I think if you asked 50% of track owners, the actual sort of decision maker, trackside, which is of course not always the same person. You get the decision maker, and then you get some guy that helps with the track, or the guy that looks on Facebook. That's not the track owner or the decision maker. I think if you asked 50% of them, they wouldn't know necessarily the financial breakdown of hosting a European Championship. They wouldn't know like the cut from the entry fee, or the entry fee that goes to the track, the sponsorship breakdowns, all of those parts. I think that they wouldn't know the intimate details of, and I think trying to improve that communication out would be, a good step to hopefully getting more tracks to apply for ECs.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking at the next proposal, I don't know if we're going to go through every single one, but this is about who proposes for a candidate. I think.
Yeah. Coming from BRCA,
Yeah. It's important for a member federation to make any proposal to be heard at the EFRA AGM. It's down to the member federations.
Yeah, it's essentially eliminating EFRA's right to reserve any such proposal from an EFRA member federation. Basically, and the position of vice president has to be from within existing EFRA board following any elections at the AGM, and it will be deemed annually by the existing board members. So that's basically just removing EFRA's right to reject a proposal for any means that they may deem.
EFRA didn't reject this proposal.
No, of course, which of course is funny in itself, because the only time that there would be a proposal rejected is because it is, it has real means to be rejected. And it's tricky really, because I think sometimes what people, or it's really hard to understand, is that when you have your sort of, and Darren Newton of course will know this completely with his position inside the BRCA. As the chairman of the BRCA, he will know how important it is to have an incredibly good functioning, communicative core exec. And in these instances where someone actually comes in with a proposal that's not necessarily conducive to having a good communicating core exec, or it's like really not the right time, then the right to at least dispute that directly is not then granted.
But I mean, EFRA has never. Well, you don't shy away from the challenging issues by just we'll just veto that. We'll veto that.
No.
This is case in point, and I'm sure it will be an interesting discussion had. At the AGM, but it's not to shy away from issues. It's to protect.
Certainly not, and of course, and as you see in if you look at the agendas, every single proposal that comes in, of course, goes into all of the agendas. It is only normally if there is there's like a double exec position proposal that comes in, for example, which would essentially change 66% of the core exec, which is the president, the secretary, and the treasurer. That, for example, 2 new people came in 1 year. That would be pretty damaging. Of course, the federations would vote on it and make their choices, but it can be a slippery slope. The exec really has to function well. It has to be integrated. There have to be really sort of quite a lot of alignment on views. in order to have a real functioning organisation like EFRA is.
Yeah. Now we've got one literally about the general meetings held in November. A special general meeting will be called after the executive board. So remarks. The whole board.
Yeah, this is actually this is one that's come in from EFRA. It's about again just sort of like pushing that thing about sort of executive stabilisation, of actually making it that the executive positions on the board will be for a 4-year period as opposed to a 2-year period. So at the moment, it's just the president is a 4-year term, and the general secretary and the treasurer is on a 2-year is on a 2-year schedule in its current state. I think it's 2 years. It's 2 years. So that will then change. The treasurer and the secretary will also then go to a 4-year thing with a 4-year sort of 4-year assignment, I guess, or
Which
4 years
hopefully
in
means
position.
yourself and the new treasurer are not allowed to leave for 4 years. You're forced to remain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're actually
it's like a sentence
at gunpoint. Yeah, it is like a 4-year sentence as opposed to a 2-year suspended sentence. So of course we discussed this a lot, and it's a proposal that's come through from the EFRA board. It's something, of course, that I think I'm totally for. Of course, directly affecting me, because the issue is that if you have someone that's coming into a position like this, I think by the time you've done your 2 years, you've only just started to even understand the role completely, start to finish.
Yeah.
And then at that point, for them to be a change is really difficult. It would be incredibly difficult to make positive change. And of course, the only, I guess, potential drawback to that is that you have to get somebody who's kind of happy to do it for 4 years, which is a bit of that is an obstacle right there.
Yeah.
But one that I think is generally good for the betterment of EFRA.
Next one from the Swiss Federation is talking about a seconder. I think it's just putting into the rules that there has to be a seconder.
Yeah.
For a proposal. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, and like you've said, and of course a lot of the other videos that you've done on all the other sort of agendas, is that if there's an error in the rule book, it has to then be, or an error or something missing in the rules, it has to be democratically voted on. Including, as you say, the likes of spelling mistakes and bits like that. Of course, I've noticed a few spelling mistakes over this period of time, and kind of like fixing those things is a process still.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like you say, if the federations do want to vote to continue to spell something wrong, they are within their right to do that. So it's that's the process.
The next one is about.
It looks like another example of kind of cleaning up things about a section subscription fee.
Yeah,
it's no longer a section subscription fee. Ensure
Yeah.
that all invoices are settled before federations can vote.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and this one is actually again just like a title change, which is then linked to the following rule, because there's basically very little wording as to it's all within EFRA. Of course, it's always talking about European Championships, but of course EFRA has lots of decisions and lots of process to follow when it comes to IFMAR World Championships, and we're just sort of ratifying that into the rule set.
Yeah. Then we have a rule. Well, it's a proposal it's a change in membership fees.
Yeah, Euros entry fee.
Yeah.
Moving it in line, and the associated handling fee. Moving it in line with the sort of with the associated costs of hosting these events, as EFRA continues to try and elevate the standard of European Championships. It's a combination of both of those things, where you want to increase the standard of the races, plus you're in a period of time, which of course everybody knows now, where just the general costs of operations are massive. We're trying to have more people at Euros doing better jobs with more structure, and there's more professionalism that's trying to be introduced to that. That's one factor which invariably incurs cost. And then you have just the simple year-on-year annual increases that sometimes are incredibly disproportionate. If you look at a flight 2 years ago, it was X amount, and now it's 2X, or even hotel costs and various associated costs.
Everything's more expensive, including the costs for EFRA as well.
No one is excused from that.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah. Okay. What do we have next?
That's the same one.
It's the same one. It's quite a lengthy one. What do we have here?
A thing about membership fee deadlines.
So again, it's actually just this is 3.6.1. This is again just like a cleaning up of terminology. EFRA no longer has individual registration and fees for each section. It's not done sectionally. It's just generally now. So just the rules to reflect that.
Yeah.
And there's another cleanup
Removing
proposal.
Removing a large scale part from the text.
Yeah. And it's basically of course, we're going through the general rules. The general rules need to be general rules as opposed to sectional specific rules that then are sort of determined to be inside the section. If, of course, sections have got their own individual rules on certain processes or how things follow that work for their classes or for their drivers. But general rules needs to be general.
Yeah. This one's about allocation. Now, this is one thing it took me a little bit to understand when I first started going to the AGMs, and maybe it's something that a general racer wouldn't be aware of. But each federation has an allocation of basically a specific number of spaces that they can say, well, we want X number of drivers to go to the 2026 European Championships. So, can you just explain? That's what this proposal's about.
So basically,
generally how that works, just very, very quickly.
Yeah, so the process is relatively straightforward. That drivers communicate with their federations. The federations then internally communicate with their EFRA representatives, who would then be attending the AGM, or even not attending the AGM, but submitting like event request totals. That's then where that's kind of that is spoken about at the AGM. How many spots you want for this race or whatever it is, whichever race that may be. You put in a provisional request. Because, of course, no event allocations are confirmed at the AGM. They're just communicated between the federations to EFRA, because, of course, that changes between this November and then the deadline, which is the 21st of January when the numbers are finalised. That, of course, changes a lot. So it's just putting it in there that, of course, these numbers decided at the AGM are provisional. Which has been the case for years and years and years, and they are, of course, confirmed on the 21st of January.
Yeah, and I've already seen in some, I've seen Bob Harley mention in, I think, the BRCA 1/10 or 1/8 IC track Facebook group, saying, if you want to go to the Worlds in Gubbio next year, let us know, because the BRCA have to tell the section chairman, Dan Jones, how many drivers from the UK want to go. So I imagine that's the same thing happening across DMC and SRCCA and all the different federations.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, it's a slightly different process when it comes to requesting for an IFMAR Worlds. But the EFRA European Championship event, allocation requests is a tried and sort of true process of confirming those numbers that then get fixed on the 21st of January, because, like we say, there are so many changes, people wanting to go. But what it also means is a country can put a request in, and then they can they're not committed into requesting those spots up until the 21st of January. So, of course, you're hoping that countries are asking for more spots, but that is sometimes not the case, and actually countries are then handing them back. So it just gives some flexibility for the countries for that.
Yeah.
Now, this next rule, it was discussed at length at the last AGM. And I think we often see that a rule will come in, and then very quickly it will either be changed quite drastically, or just tidied up, or just finessed. And this rule is around non-EFRA people who are not from Europe, I guess, racing within EFRA, attending a Euros if certain conditions permit it to happen.
Yeah.
And obviously one of the big hot potatoes was, well, everybody who's within Europe should have first refusal. Like if there's nobody else from Europe going to come, and there's definitely nobody else wants to come, then we can allow someone from America or from from wherever, Australia,
anywhere else, anywhere else in the world.
And it's something that's happened for many years. Kind of informally, we've seen at large scale events. Callum Gunn from Australia turns up every year, and it just happens, and everyone's happy to see him there, and it happens at other events. But we had a young American racing at the 10th scale buggy Euros, and that was a great thing. That was kind of a collaboration between EFRA and the federation and the organizer, which allowed that to happen. But I guess all these things it just has to be nailed down exactly, so that every rule is done for
the good of everyone, of course, like protecting the integrity of EFRA and European Championship events and what a European Championship event actually is, but then of course not kind of just really locking things down so much that if you had an event that you were hosting and you had an event cap of 100, made up numbers, you had an event cap of 100 people and you had 50 Europeans that wanted to race it, and then you actually had 50 ROW drivers, rest of the world drivers, that wanted to race, and there was unfortunately a rule that said, no, sorry, that's not possible. You're throttling, you're throttling events for no real tangible benefit. And as you can see in this wording, that's then of course been has been sort of expanded on and tidied up, I guess. No non-European competitor may claim the title of European champion. I mean, that is of course like your integrity protection of a European championship, but then you also put mechanisms in place to allow people to attend the event if they're from outside EFRA as well. And everything is then, all the requests are done and sorted and completed, but you've still got spaces. There is no other sort of organisation that would say, no, sorry, you can't come and race this amazing, fantastic event because there's a rule in the rule book that says you can't. Sorry, it would be a pain.
Empty positions don't really help anyone. They don't help the organiser. They don't help the other competitors.
No,
they don't help the sport.
There is no winner. There is no winner in that scenario.
Okay. Oh, team driving. Okay, so we have one about.
So it's sort of actually not. Yeah, I actually spoke with Phil Chester about this little, because when you kind of then really get into it, is that it's actually not to do with team driving. It's basically putting a mechanism in place to allow decisions to be made on the day for penalties, rather than it. The event's done, the event's finished, and then it gets spoken about. Invariably at our next board meeting or whatever. It gives the opportunity for the, in this instance, of course, the EFRA official to make a decision on a penalty that is for something that's happened whilst you've got the people there, and that's that. I think it's something that will be, discussed back and forth. The tricky part is that you can't put a proposal in and there not be any sort of unprecedented considerations, and that's why an AGM is a superb event, of course, because you do actually have a lot of input, a lot of suggestions, a lot of like alternative thoughts. The way you think, oh, cracky, I didn't think about that sort of that potential repercussion of something to something that's then going to be put into the rulebook in black and white.
Drivers involved must be called to represent either himself or herself at the meeting of the General Committee. This is another one from Phil, BRCA.
Yeah, kind of like a bit of a follow-on from the previous one, where if for example, if somebody has left the venue, it's hard to understand kind of the exact wording, but I guess the remark is exactly what Phil is trying to sort of get across with it. Current rule prevents race meeting officials from taking action for events in case of gross misconduct and serious unsportsmanlike behaviour. Several incidents have gone unpunished, as racing penalties would no longer impact the driver's outcome. Where the current rule provides a process, it's long-winded and impractical, as witnesses will not attend future EFRA meetings. Incidents need to be dealt with quickly and efficiently after they happen. Which I think, while of course that of course sounds good. It is not always that straightforward. Although, of course, I think giving a little bit of sort of ability to be, the problem is that sometimes you need the ability to be kind of dynamic trackside if there's a situation developing, but then you also really need to have process. So sometimes you're stuck between a sort of rock and a hard place with how to make decisions, and then making sure that there's not, that the decision making follows process and it's not just completely subjective.
We have seen, particularly in a number of years ago in Electric on Road, where a podium was changed due to retrospective disqualifications, and whilst that kind of gives more time for analysis of the situation and to be more well thought out, it's a great shame for the rightful podium position holders who just kind of get a congratulations in a text. You didn't get your photo, you didn't get your moment. Maybe you get a trophy through the post, but it really, you are kind of robbed of your rightful position. If it's not dealt with at the track. So I can see why it's not a job I'd like to do.
No, and that's then also the other difficult part is you don't want to kind of put rules in black and white, where it really kind of puts the either the section chairman or an EFRA official trackside, where they have to make a decision in a finite moment, where actually maybe it's not possible to make that decision without more facts of the situation that you don't have. And then it puts some of the onus on that EFRA official to make an instantaneous, quick decision. Oh, right, well, this is what happened. Sometimes you don't have all of the facts, and you don't want to kind of walk into making the wrong judgment.
Such a responsibility.
Tricky. It's tricky both ways.
We witnessed it at the GT8 Euros in Leipzig, and it was not a nice situation for anyone involved, but at least the rightful European champion was declared at the event and had their moment, which was great for them. Very unfortunate for those who were affected, either due to the penalty or having to hand out the penalty, because that's a horrible job. Nobody wants to ever do that.
No.
But that's how racing is, isn't it? It's one of those things.
Unfortunately, it's the highs and the lows of racing, and sometimes the lows are different. Sometimes it's because you crashed and wrote your car off, and sometimes it's because you have to make a tough decision that you probably don't want to make. Those are the lows.
I think we've got. We're now over into a slightly different section, which is general requirements for EFRA events, and this one's about the position of the loop. And it references Halifax, which hosted the 8th scale Nitro Euros, which you attended for an afternoon at least.
I did.
I wasn't aware of a specific problem, but obviously
no. I think what it's just doing is just making sure that. I actually think what the case may have been is that you could see that the timing and the lap counting is after the entry of the pit lane. So I'm actually just thinking back at the actual venue, whether this is kind of so specific. Of course, they mention, of course, this is mentioned by the board about referring to Halifax, although it obviously happens in multiple venues where if you have the loop after a sensible section on the pit lane entry, it always just creates a consideration. Even, for example, at the World's Track at Portugal, at Barcelos, where obviously this year had the Euro A's and 8th Off-Road Buggy and the E-Buggy Worlds. If you have the sort of loop, the timing loop in a position where it's very close to the entrance of the pit lane, you always then have a consideration during practices that either all of the cars have to do a whole nother lap, and then it just really extends out your timings for the whole day. Your timetable is even longer because you have to add all of those laps back on for every single racer. You have to allow this kind of like that in lap, I guess, at the end of practices and stuff like that. Or you have it that it introduces a bit of a danger zone where they want to race to the loop to get that final lap on a 3-lap reseed, the final lap that really matters, and then they want to cut in because it's race over and practice is done. And then of course you have, for example, at Redovan, talking about 8th off-road track specifically, I guess, that has got a sort of a relative internal loop position, where that's, I guess it's 5 seconds, 8 seconds maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds before the actual pit lane entry, which gives a real time to say, okay, that's it, race over. Cars then race to the line, and then they do 1, 2 more corners, and then they can come into the pit lane. So yeah, it's it could be better.
We're on to charging, which I know we've covered quite in a bit of depth with Paul Worsley in the electric section.
Yeah, well, this is specifically about batteries must have a connectors, not soldered, hard soldered in.
And basically, so this proposal came around actually because in electric racing, there's been sort of lots of new connector styles that are kind of coming around, and there was a lot of discussion that we had with this proposal, where basically you have sort of like your conventional push-in style 4 or 5 mil, predominantly 5 mil bullet connectors, which is of course just friction fit. And at times, of course, if the connector is loose or the connector's worn or the connector falls out, it introduces a security risk. A lot of the times where you notice that batteries are having failures, the plugs are melting out the battery, is because you've got a loose fitting connector. It creates super high resistance, a lot of heat, battery melts out. You've got a lipo fire, or that's a drama. And we actually spoke a lot about this at the eBuggy Worlds, with Tim Caporal from IFMA and having lots of discussions about it, where now there are sort of toolless locking connectors that are like a twisting style, just like a locking plug on the top that actually then secures the connector inside the battery in the battery terminal, reducing that risk of, first of all, batteries coming out, or connectors coming out, but also really reduces that risk of a loose connector drama, high resistance, and therefore massively high amounts of heat. However, I think it's also important that, as it is said in this proposal, there are 2 sort of new style of locking connectors. One where it's toolless with a sort of aluminium tab that you can kind of screw down with your fingers. And then another style that uses a 1.5 mil set screw, a set screw, a grub screw, but it requires a tool in order to release the connector, which I think is a little bit of a slippery slope, because essentially, if you need to use a tool to remove the battery, whether it's you're soldering it on directly or you're using a 1.5 mil driver to literally screw the battery terminal onto the battery, that is in a very similar category. If you're able to unscrew it and remove it without the use of tools, then that can be done by anybody in a safety situation that is occurring. I don't have a 1.5 mil driver in my pocket, so actually can't be coming out. And then we then spoke about this was again the conversations with Tim, that if there is a speedo failure, and the speedos have let out the magic smoke. Invariably, the battery and the assembly disconnects itself, because normally it's the positive lead that just melts off the speedo, and it has isolated itself from the power automatically because it's melted. So in that instance, you don't have to worry about taking the connector off anyway because it's melted off the speedo. So it's just basically making sure that we don't have to use a tool to take those connectors out.
I think this is a perfect example of how the industry moves year to year, and there's new things that come out, like you're saying, these new battery connectors, and the safety aspect always has to be looked at, and EFRA and IFMAR and ROAR, all the various different major RC blocks of federations do communicate and work with each other to coordinate these rules. And we've covered this in the other Inside EFRA podcasts that we've discussed for this 2025 AGM. But this is, in this case, this is a great example of that happening, where things, the industry moves on. There's new things. Oh, well, here's this new thing that we have to discuss. It's like, should a marshal need a 1.5 mil driver to take out a battery that's about to explode? No, they shouldn't. They should be able to take it out with their hands and throw it off the track so that a car doesn't burst into flames or something like that.
And that's sometimes that's the tricky part, is that, of course, EFRA itself has to really have ears on the ground with emerging technologies and new things that are coming. And then it also has to have kind of mechanisms in place to try to flexibly and in a reasonable timescale introduce that into the sort of the rule book of racing.
Definitely.
Which is, of course, not always that straightforward.
Yeah.
Organisation of EFRA events, we're on to the responsibility being with the Federation for registering transponders, is this?
Yeah, so basically already the federations are responsible for making sure that the date of births are inputted, the transponders are inputted, but basically that isn't written in the rule book. And whilst, of course, when federations are putting their drivers into the various events, many do put their transponder numbers in and their date of births in. But everybody knows the kind of day one drama of a Euros where, we've got 50% of the transponders wrong, which for a big event can be literally 70, 80 people that have got their wrong transponder numbers. It really creates a big burden for timekeeping. Rather than actually doing anything to do with the race, they're literally counting numbers all day, trying to put PTs in the right place. And I think it's just important that there is sort of a little bit clearer that this must be introduced. You must put your transponder numbers in, and you must put in your date of birth. Then it just reduces the burden on the organisers, not just for transponder numbers being wrong all over the place, left, right, and centre. I mean, of course, when people register for this race, I'm sure they then have transponder changes and various things over the year, and that's absolutely fine. Of course, that's understandable and unavoidable. But date of births, your date of birth doesn't change like a transponder does. So then the event organizer can more easily start just collating that data to create events and make sure everybody's in the right category. If you have a junior final or you have a 40 plus final and you don't have date of birth data, the burden on the organizer or the timekeeper or the team managers or whoever it may be, whichever official trackside, to get that data, it's a big job. It's a big job and a big task, and just trying to make that a little bit clearer about how necessary that is.
Right. Okay.
This is one we had this last year as well. A lot of discussion about what happens to an individual driver when their transponder fails and who the onus is on in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was talked about very strong arguments in both directions at last year's AGM. And I can't remember if it ended up with a rule change last year or a rule addition last year. I can't remember where it went. But
so basically, I think there were sort of like multiple attempts to amend the proposal wording. And the problem is that if you're kind of amending things 2, 3, 4 times, you've not got enough time to create a really nuanced and structured and clear black and white rule in that time period that you've got to kind of to amend a proposal. And sometimes then, like what happened last year, there are a couple of attempts of it being sort of amended so that it gives protection for all trackside. it's just not enough time. So
Yeah.
that then invariably then rolls into the next year. You've had a whole year, literally a whole year to really think about the wording and really sort of restructure it and make it very clear. And also introducing other factors. For example, you'll see in red, the use of an EFRA finish line camera may be used in the event of a transponder failure or protested timing result. That wasn't in the 2024 or 2024 proposal, and that's a good introduction of that. So it's basically sometimes something needs to be reworded start to finish, and you can't do that when you're just trying to amend wording.
Again, it's another thing that puts pressure on the timekeeper, isn't it?
Yeah.
If a racer's transponder fails, that they've got to now manually.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And if it happened, it doesn't happen very often. But if it happened to two drivers in the same race, would they pick one? It can't. You could never have that situation. You have to count none of them. Then sure.
That's where the primary issue comes from.
Yeah.
It's a massive burden on the timekeeper. It's not just a burden, it's like a moral decision of, if, for example, the timekeeper could literally just say, oh, well, I actually don't like this guy. I will attempt to do it, but I attempted and I failed to do it. Yeah. So the wording right now is just reading the exact wording, in such cases, must try to count. That's not rule wording. You can't put must try. That's not black or white. That's something in between. And you can't have wording like that in rules. Otherwise, it's just an advisory. So in this instance, it then means that the timekeeper is not obligated to do that. There are lots of times in racing where, if this is a European Championship main final and it's a leader. Okay, sure, but then I think the same respect and consideration should then be granted for the 1, 2, 5, 6 bottom final driver, and nobody could tell me that that's what happens. And of course, the BRCA rule, for example, which of course I sort of know and understand relatively intimately, is very clear. In the event that a transponder doesn't count, transponder is the responsibility of the driver, and there's always often the argument if your transponder physically breaks, which is invariably what happens, and it's happened multiple times. It's just like if a glow plug went. If your glow plug breaks, your engine stops, your race is over. It's game over, isn't it? You're not winning.
Yeah.
But somehow, if your transponder breaks, like a glow plug could break. Then there's a sort of a compensation that's allowed to people to kind of just subjectively decide that, oh well, actually you did those laps, sure, and that's a slippery slope, or one that just puts burden on the timekeeper, and at the end of the day, the European Championship is incredibly structured. All of the Euros have got 2 fully independent timing systems. Timing loops, computers, everything is all done in parallel. If your transponder has not counted on either of those systems, that's a you problem. In the wording of this rule, at least. Yeah. Or this proposal.
What's this about junior drivers?
Yeah, so this is basically another one that's come in about. Essentially trying to just completely homogenate the what is classified as a junior, right. And it was and it's true difference between an under 17 and an under 16 is very different. As seen in the remarks for it, the award was previously under 16 until recent years. But you do have drivers aged 12, 13, 14 competing against drivers that could be in full-time employment, paying taxes, could even have a license to drive a full-size car on the roads. And okay, yeah, that's kind of just a change. The only thing I think I just would personally want to try and really make sure that happens with something like this is that it is then just somehow, it's a miracle of course, to be universal. in either whether it's an EFMA race or an EFRA race or your local country federation race, if it was just really clear criteria and this was it, then so be it, and that would be a really good thing. But I fear it's never going to be that simple.
Failure to marshal. This happens almost every event we go to. It happens at least once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the actual?
Yeah, just no penalty. The penalty, wasn't missing. Was missing from the original wording.
And the penalty is permanent lifetime ban.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shot at dawn. Which sometimes feels appropriate, where you kind of think, well, everybody else has managed to get there. Why are we waiting? But
homologation of mufflers.
Yeah, this was a interesting. I glanced over this one, but I did not read it word for word. I could not quite understand. There are a lot of words. There's a lot of red words, crosswords, crossed out, and then added in. So it's like each driver is going to have personally identifiable mufflers?
No.
Homemade.
So basically the two things so I wrote this one. I wrote all of these, but I wrote this one. Believe me, the number of crossing out and red and changes was pretty offensive. But this is kind of a scenario where you kind of think, well, I somehow need to rewrite all of this. Including a lot of punctuation, a lot of grammar. But it's two things. It's essentially, you notice that in the original ruling, it's referencing dates. All mufflers on the 2013 list that are still sold and manufactured must be registered again before the following season. Basically, it makes it dateless. So all mufflers on the current published list that are still sold and manufactured must be registered again. So it basically makes it a timeless rule, which is important. You don't want to keep on amending rules year on year, just to do that. And then it essentially rewrites some of the wording about commercial availability. So before it was registration is needed to be sure mufflers are made according to specific dimensions. Just again a change in just changing the English on that. Registration is needed to make sure there is a product in the shops, full stop. Which of course is kind of relatively poor wording. Registration is needed to avoid self-made mufflers used at club level.
Yeah, that's
again,
an interesting one.
Yeah, just slightly weak wording. Registration is needed to control the weight, the design and weight, which are part of the noise production. So then the wording is amended to registration is needed to ensure mufflers are manufactured according to the specific dimensions. Mufflers are manufactured, they're not made. Pretty clear. Registration is needed to confirm that the individual products are available for order/purchase. Shops is not a good word to have for it. Shop implies that that's a physical outlet. And of course there are lots of online shops, and so they need to be able to order. That you need to be able to order something or purchase it.
Yeah.
Quite clear. Registration is needed to prevent the use of homemade mufflers. Full stop. No used at club level. That's sort of. I don't know anybody that uses a homemade muffler in this day and age. And then registration is needed to control the design and weight, which directly affect noise production. So basically, the previous wording had stuff in there about commercial availability but it was just so sort of ambiguously written that it had to be fixed. And then the remark for that is registration ensures mufflers meet approved dimensions, are commercially available and not homemade. It also allows EFRA to control design and weight, which directly affect noise levels and fairness in competition, while bringing the rule in line with current regulations.
Yeah.
Pretty clear.
So there's I mean, Nitro people who've been around for a while will know this, but it's like there's noise checks at every EFRA event, and if the noise decibel meter, I think it's called, spikes when a certain car crosses the line, they know who to go to, and obviously that means there's no like prototype like at Halifax or Redavon or whatever. There's no manufacturer that's made a specific prototype
Yeah.
pipe for that particular, like for the top driver, here's your super secret thing. It has to be commercially available and it has been checked and it's got markings on it, EFRA,
homologation
4-digit number. Yeah, homologation.
Yeah, the whole point about having homologation is to ensure that there's fairness. Yeah. And this rule essentially said that you had to have homologation, but it didn't directly say that it had to have commercial availability linked in with that. You can't homologate a prototype part. That's obviously completely goes against the nature of homologation, where there's then freeness for people to purchase that specific product, and it is then therefore homologated. And of course, the whole reason for the homologation of pipes is, of course, just directly related to volume levels, because it's something that affects so many tracks. And of course, I'm sure everybody would know that probably the louder you pipe, the louder you can make the pipe, the better it is, and the more free flowing it is, and whatever the sort of truth in all of that may be.
Yeah,
got to be careful, because one of the biggest issues that closes venues down is noise complaints and things associated with that. And EFRA has a pretty serious obligation to try to make sure that tracks are protected from that. And it can only happen in this manner. It has to be structured, it has to be regulated. Otherwise, again, it's a slippery slope, and there can't be any sort of subjectivity. Oh, it's not too loud. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
That just doesn't fit with a rule book, and it certainly doesn't fit when it comes to protecting tracks from that.
So, brings us to the end of the proposals, and then after the proposals, as we've seen in all these sections, we have kind of suggestions, which are kind of like informal proposals, where the proposee or the suggester just wants to have a discussion, and that might then turn into a future rule or whatever. And the first one we've discussed with Ian, because it's very large-scale centric with the LumiRank system. And then there's not many, is there? We have one from Nomac, which is around making the rulebook easier to read and maybe splitting it into sections for timekeeper, technical inspection, etc. Yeah,
I'm sure something that will certainly be discussed. It's always the battle where you want to kind of have quite clear regulation and quite clear black and white ruling, but then you also don't want to really bloat the rule book out where you're basically having a rule for the sake of a rule, or a rule for a rule. That's also something that you don't want to, you also really don't want to kind of do. I think generally the sort of breakdown of the rules is quite okay as it is right now. But maybe there could be sort of like some like breakaway digital rule book of one that is specific for a timekeeper, or sort of like rules that would affect X person or this person or this person. A competitor rule book, a timekeeper rule book, and then a sort of organizer rule book maybe. All of which just being formulated from the original rule book, but just kind of isolating out bits that, the organizer probably doesn't need to know about the homologation fee for an exhaust pipe. But therefore that wouldn't then be included in their sort of their amended rule book. But again, something that will be discussed, but
fair enough. Good stuff. And then, again, another one from Nomax, just international drivers registration numbers, to keep the number the same each year. Keep the number the same permanently, I guess.
Yeah, so it's actually, it's just about putting TP numbers being transponder numbers on the EFRA website. That's basically just trying to keep that on file for, at least as far as I can sort of reading in between the lines of it. It's about keeping potentially transponder numbers on file for a driver, and having it in their profile so it doesn't need to be sort of re-input every year, which I think is good. That is a good discussion point.
And that brings us to the end. Are there any points that you think we could have missed, or do you think we've covered all the main talking points?
We've covered it off pretty well. As you both know very well, I can talk a lot, so I think we can we can put you out your misery and keep it
We're
nice
looking forward to a weekend of talking in Alicante.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a fantastic AGM.
Yeah, it really will. I look forward to it. It's kind of like, for me, the Sunday PM flight home will be quite a relief, as it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work over the last months and months, putting all of it together. So it'll be nice to have kind of got the first successful AGM under my belt.
And then 3 more to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.